some of them are making a significant amount of money. There is absolutely no doubt about it, but a lot of that is driven by the fact that we operate with 3 officers on the street, 1 officer in the station. Right now, on the overnight shifts, we're operating with 1 officer in the station and 2 on the street. And that forces an overtime threshold to be acted on a little bit earlier. So in fact, in many instances, we're holding over officers and forcing them to work overtime. So some of them are not of the ilk or mind to be working the number of hours they are working. But they're doing it because they know that if they don't work it, their brother officer on the street is by themselves, and they will not be able to provide the level of service that the residents of this community expect and deserve. I can give you one example of what happened Sunday. Sunday, we were running short shifted, and there was a disturbance in one of our public housing units in the community. There was two gentlemen in the apartment fighting, and the 2 police officers who were on the street responded to that apartment. They went in, found one of the combatants had a warrant, so they arrested the warrant, and there was a wrestling match. Now, I'm not sure how many people in this room have an occupation where they've got to walk in to a situation and not know whether you're going to walk out with a broken nose, a twisted knee, or perhaps even lose your life. But I do know firefighters and cops. That's the nature of our job. And these 2 guys walked in. They ended up into a situation where they got control of the individual, brought him back to the station. Now, there's 1 officer in the station. The 1 officer in the station had to abandon the 911 dispatch center to get downstairs to help the other officer bring in the prisoner. The prisoner was acting up, so they ended up putting him into a holding cell. In the meantime, the officer stayed at the apartment because there were 3 babies there. The individual had a 5-year-old, a 2-year-old, and an 18-month-year-old, and he was extremely intoxicated, and yet they couldn't remove him from the scene because they needed Department of Family and Children's Services there. They were 3 hours out to get there. So the officer was trying to manipulate and manage those individuals, and the father is agitated. He's got the baby in a stroller, and he's rocking them back and forth, and so the officer had to intervene to stop that for obvious reasons. So they had to call the officer back that was in the process of booking and bring him back to scene. So there was nobody on the street. There was absolutely nobody patrolling the streets of North Reading. That's the kind of services that we're venturing into, and that we're going through that for the past year. We've been surviving fine. Fortunately, nobody's been seriously hurt in the community, and no police officer's been hurt. But that's the fear I have as an administrator, and I'm sure our board shares the same sentiment, that when we go home at night, we worry. Are we going to get that phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning that somebody has been killed? Because we do have drug overdoses in North Reading, an extremely high amount. We have a tremendous amount of domestic violence in the community, and we have other crimes that are dangerous. And so I go home at night, and I know these gentlemen do as well. And they worry about, am I going to get a call from the chief saying, listen, we've had an officer hurt, and that's happened in the past, or we've had somebody in the community killed because we couldn't get there quick enough or respond adequately enough. It's a very, very disheartening, dread-filled, fearful feeling when you go home at night with that kind of a worry, and it's 7 days a week that we all go home. So it's not just the schools. I mean, the police department is a great police department working with the situations they're confronted with. The fire department is doing exactly the same thing. They're in the same circumstance, the same types of dangers that the police are facing. And we are now operating not at a level funded budget, we're operating at less than level funded. And we hope that we can provide level services to the community so that those fears and those dreads that I know I have, the selectmen have, and I know Chief Harris has, at night, that they don't come true. So that was my little advocacy for the police and fire. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say this, you know, in deference to the police and the police chief and the fire chief, they did learn about this evening, or maybe earlier this afternoon. So, and, you know, what I would like to get from the board is that we're basically in support of the budget as presented by the town administrator. We're going to vote on the budget at our next formal meeting. At which point there's time for the police chief, the fire chief, the town administrator to get together to discuss other options in terms of dealing with funding the budget. You know, the suggestion I think the fire chief made about funding the overtime out of the debt service and then taking money that we collect from FEMA and putting it in. I mean, maybe there's some other way of dealing with this issue to take maybe some of the concerns that the two chiefs have. So, you know, I think we have the 2 weeks to have, give them an opportunity to provide some feedback and some ideas. Maybe there's some adjustments to, you know, how they're running the departments that would help out. And of course, you know, if we go forward with, as it was presented, and come toward the end of the year, there's an issue with overtime. I mean, there are other, I'm talking about, you know, the course of FY 2011, there are other issues. There's the Finance Committee. There's the opportunity in October town meeting to fund the budget, even if the FEMA money doesn't come in, or it doesn't come in to the extent from other resources. So I think that we should give them at least an opportunity to further discuss the issue. Mr. Yule.
Yes. Chief Nolan, thank you for that description of describing a point in time when the town is vulnerable, I think is what you're saying. Okay, because there was nobody on the street, they were at this one location. And that should tell us something, that it's not only the schools, it's the police, it's the fire. Fire has their circumstance. I think that adds credence to the argument that the answer is at the state level. I mean, once we adjust our budget in any which way that we can, we do the best that we can. We can't just walk away. It doesn't end today, or it doesn't end at town meeting. We're going to have 2012, and it's going to be worse, and it's going to be the same arguments. So, you know, we really need to, as a community, you know, rally together, work together, put whatever differences we have aside, and approach the state, find ways to approach the state as a group, even with our own personal, departmental reasons, and do that. I think that your example there really addresses the point that we only have so much money, and the state has what they have, and they're the ones that are dictating to us. We need to go to the state. And again, I'd like to see people reach out to each other here, all right? Because we're 5 individuals, and we have X amount of dollars to work with, and that's it. And we can move some here, we can move some there, it doesn't matter. It's still the same amount of money. So the only way the funds that we have are going to become greater is if we go to the state and make sure they give us more in return for what we give them. So.
Okay, is there anyone else? I'd like to, we have other things on our agenda.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes. I'd like to close the public hearing. Mr. O'Leary, you haven't said very much, so.
No, I haven't said anything, yeah.
Mr. Delaney?
You want to discuss insurance options? Because I know you presented us with some materials regarding health insurance. If you want to delay that until later, that's fine, but I think there's other options if we look at health insurance.
I'd like to chat with the board on the basis of strategy a little bit later
Fair
on
enough.
about that.
Fair enough.
Okay, at this point, I'll close.
okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. O'Leary.
I mean, you can close the public portion, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm going to close the public portion of the meeting. Mr. O'Leary.
Oh, just a couple of observations and comments, I guess. The state can't solve our problems. The state has a whole host of problems themselves, and it's the same as we have as far as funding. they don't have enough money to fund the Health and Human Services budget, they don't have social services agencies, public safety, or anything else. So we have a fundamental problem as far as funding, period, whether it be public safety or education. And, you know, while we're bailing out big corporations and trying to create jobs at the same time, you know, our local services are suffering, and the federal government is sending some funds to us to assist us through the ARRA and other funding mechanisms, stimulus funds, but those are one-time monies, maybe 2 years' worth, which is gonna come back and bite us in the ass, excuse my language, year after next. We're gonna be facing a structural deficit in the school department of probably, what, $1.2 million, $1.3 million?
Closer to 2,
Or more,
2 or more.
or maybe $2 million in a very short time, less than 18 months. Which we have to face, and we have to find out how we're gonna fund that in order to maintain these core basic services that we currently, quote, enjoy here in the town of North Reading. We do a terrific job here in North Reading of managing ourselves and managing our budgets and managing our level of services. I've sat here for a long time, and it still astounds me as to how well we've been able to manage our way through all these situations. I think this board, along with the cooperative effort of the Finance Committee and the School Committee, over the last 8 years or so, has invested a tremendous amount of time and effort to ensure that when we go into town meeting, we're unified. And that hasn't always been the case. And in doing so, it's required many members of all three boards, hundreds and hundreds of hours of volunteer time to get this stuff done well ahead of time and get a consensus among the board members to make it work. We have our advocacy groups who do a tremendous job both here at the local level and now at the state level, and is having an impact, which is a wonderful thing. But by the same token, you know, when I hear, you know, the salaries being put out there as almost a foil to pit one against the other, you know, just because the police and firefighters are some of the most highest paid employees of the town of North Reading does not necessarily mean that's a good or a bad thing. I mean, these men and women are putting in a significant amount of time away from their families in order to earn those salaries and to serve the public in relation to the priorities and the way that we have designed, the administration here has designed our departments to work. Chief Harris is absolutely right. I've been on the board since 1988. Every single year, whoever the fire chief was has come in and said, we need more people. We can't maintain the current level of services at a reasonable cost with the same number of people. If you're looking to cut overtime, give us more people in order to do and provide the services. We haven't seen fit to do that. We haven't seen from an economic standpoint that works. We'd rather pay the overtime to the current staffing level in order to maintain the excellent level of service that the fire department gives us. The police department hasn't grown very much over the last few years either, and is currently operating short-handed. The amount of time and effort that these people put in from a public safety standpoint is phenomenal and greatly underappreciated. We don't talk very much about the Department of Public Works. We don't talk about the town hall staff very often. But the day-to-day operations and how it works, we are at bare bones minimums. We're at 0.3 people in some departments, 0.7 people, not even a full-time equivalent. And in the past fiscal year, what the municipal employees have done has been phenomenal, stepping up to the plate without exception, taking no step increases and no cost of living increases in order for us to assist in maintaining the current level of services that the public enjoys and expects, and also trying to safeguard the layoffs of their fellow colleagues sitting next to them and working beside them. Because once we lay them off, that costs us more money. And I know it's difficult, but the school department wasn't able to effectuate the same thing from their unions and bring it about. Nobody's overpaid here in the town of North Reading. If you look at their base wages and base salaries, nobody's overpaid. You know, everybody's earning what they're getting paid and deserve more. But you know, it makes it difficult when we have increases on certain portions of the town, of